This Saturday is Election Day, which means everyone and their mothers will be down at the polls casting their vote, eager for their democracy sausage. And that statement right there is essential to Australian democracy, the right enshrined to anyone and everyone to vote. That sausage is in our constitution. But it's not just a right to vote that we have in this country, it's an obligation. See, voting in Australia is mandatory, which means if you don't vote, you risk a $20 fine the first time, and any missed votes after that is a $50 fine. And this policy, this law, has led to record amounts of voter registration and election participation. This year, we've seen 96.8% of eligible Australians registered to vote, which is the highest it's ever been in Australia's history and considered to be probably the highest recorded rate in all of history. So how is Australia's voter registration and participation so high? Are we that scared of a $20 fine, or is there a little more going on here? Voting in Australia is very easy. If you're an Australian citizen above the age of 16, you're heavily encouraged to register with the Electoral Commission to be counted on the electoral roll. Now, people can't actually vote until they're 18, but giving people 2 years of encouragement to register is likely why we have a staggeringly high youth registration rate, that being voters between the age of 18 to 24, of 88.8%. And those numbers were similar for the 2016 federal election and the 2017 gay marriage vote, which wasn't even mandatory. Which is insane that not just the general population, but also young people are getting involved, they're voting, they're having their voices heard. So, we know the numbers look good and it's easy to register, but still, why are the rates so damn high? Like I said before, it's easy to register. You can do it online. I just recently changed my address online. It's very easy, very simple and accessible. Another big reason I really do think is that $20 fine. As small as a fine as it is, for most Australians, I really think it's more of a hassle to pay it than to just go to the polls and vote. And that brings me to my next reason. Voting itself is incredibly easy. By law, elections are always held on a Saturday, so most people can make it to the polls without having to take off work. But if you are stuck on shift at KFC, manning an empty store while customers are off voting and chowing down on a democracy sausage instead of your chicken, as an example, well then it's very easy to sort out an early vote ballot. However, if you do make it to the polls on election day, it's a very quick process. 3 in 4 voters in the last federal election were in and out of the voting booths within 15 minutes. Partly because of the Saturday thing, it meant that people weren't going to the polls on their lunch break, and partly because there are massive amounts of polling places all across the country, which is great. And if that wasn't incentive enough, at the polls, you get a democracy sausage just for showing up and voting. A celebratory Aussie snack eaten in the name of our democracy, working better than any other nation. And to get an opinion on just how easy it is for a regular Joe who might not even be that interested in politics to show up and vote, I spoke to my friend Connor.
So,
Yeah. I enrolled a couple of days too late, and then when I rocked up to vote, they said we couldn't find your name, but since you rocked up,
yeah.
it's okay, and we'll let you off the hook. Which I didn't know was, I think you still get fined if you do that, or is it just
No,
something
you
you
only get fined if you don't vote.
Oh, so there you go then. That's fine.
Is there a reason you hadn't enrolled before, or just hadn't got around to it, or?
Look, before I was just, why does it matter to me? Back in the day, I was a bit scandalous, I guess you could say, and I was just like, I don't really care. So I left it to the last minute, and not too happy that I did that. But that's just the kind of mindset I had back in the day. I thought I didn't have any knowledge about politics, and whoever I voted for would just be a random guess.
Have you ever felt like it would have been in any way hard for you to vote?
Nah, even back in the day when that election was going on, I didn't even have a car, and it took me about 5 minutes to walk to a local school. And that one, there was one like 10 minutes away. There's places to elect everywhere.
Were you waiting long?
No, I went straight in. I went at about 11 o'clock, but when I went, it was fine. With the advertisement emails, letters through the mail, I don't even like texts and phone calls. I don't see how you couldn't see. It's pretty impossible to avoid. So yeah, I think it's an easy thing to do because you're not going to forget it. I've, especially throughout this election, become just aware of that, the importance of it. Yeah, I think it is a really good thing, and I think votes do matter, considering in other countries it's like abysmal. It's really good, and I think it also is really good that it's essential that you have to vote, unlike America, because if you don't have if you don't have to vote, I just don't think a lot of people are going to do it.
Now that's something that's important to touch on, because when you compare Australia's voter turnout numbers to those of other developed nations, it's clear that Australia is far and away ahead of the competition. Take the UK, for example, the country that both Australia and its democracy were based on. In their last election, they had a voter turnout of 69%. Nice. Yeah, that sucks. No, but really, that's terrible. But even worse, the US barely makes it to 60% in their presidential elections, and in their non-presidential elections, they're lucky to crack 45. Now, at the risk of sounding ungrateful, I'm gonna postulate, why don't we have a 100% voter turnout? Why is there still 3.2% of people who are eligible but not registered? Firstly, some people just still don't feel the need to vote. They're not interested, they don't care. Not many people are like that, but there are some. Secondly, young adults, people who have just turned 18, might want to go on holiday, they might want to go traveling, they might want to live overseas for a year. And if they do so, they would technically be eligible to register, but there's not much point in them registering until they get back. Thirdly, a reason could be mental disorders. Say if someone has extreme anxiety about going to the polls, they could mail a vote in early, but they might still be too intimidated. Somebody could have Down syndrome or autism, or older folks could have dementia, and some of those people might not fully understand what it is they're doing, what it is their vote means, and they might not have the capability to actually go to the polls and fill out a ballot. And for those people, they would be technically eligible, but again, there's not really much point or much urgency in getting those people registered and voting. Lastly, one reason and issue I think Australia has dealt with very well is prison and allowing our prison population to vote. The rule for people in jail is simple. If you're serving a sentence under 3 years, you vote from jail. If you're serving a sentence over 3 years, you remain on the voter roll but can't cast a vote until you're released. People in prison don't cease being members of our society or citizens. The whole population of Australia should have their voices heard in elections, even if they've broken the law. Generally though, I find Australians are very politically active whilst somehow being not very partisan or political. Because when I say politically active in Australia, I'm not talking about being part of the #resistance or wearing a red hat. I just mean actively getting registered, going to the polls and voting. It's as simple as that. I mean, people in Australia are not as married to political parties as they are in the UK and America, mainly because our main two parties have less drastic differences, and that probably makes it easier for people to look at elections through a candidate by candidate basis. But finally, I do think a big part of this is the culture, best exemplified in my view by the democracy sausage. We don't have any desire to stop anyone from voting through suppression or strict identification laws. We simply want everyone at the polls. We even have paper ballots so people aren't worried about their votes getting tampered with. Voting and being part of democracy is just a part of being Australian. It's not optional or political. Both parties currently encourage high voter turnout, and while probably not everyone enjoys the process, certainly everyone gets around it. To summarize, the reasons it's so easy to vote in Australia are: it's mandatory, elections are always on weekends, polling places are aplenty, everyone's vote counts equally towards the outcome, anyone of any economic status and even some prisoners can vote, and it's simply a non-political part of our culture. Now look, we still do have voters that are uninformed and tricked by things like Facebook fake news and fear-mongering email chains, and yes, some people will just show up to the polls and scribble on their ballot or hand in it empty. But people are never made to feel like their votes won't be counted. Everyone's vote will be counted equally, and everyone is welcome at the voting booth. Yes, our democracy is not perfect. Hell, we might even be welcoming our 6th Prime Minister in the last 6 years to the lodge. But whilst our system is not perfect, it's pretty damn good. If you're not planning on voting this election, or if you don't live in Australia and you're not planning on voting in whatever election's happening in your country, I would urge you to reconsider. Some people don't have the right to vote, and so by throwing yours away, you're throwing away a really important part of our democracy. Having your voices heard and having representation in your government is very important, and it's very important to a thriving democracy. Thank you very much for watching. I'm a very active political young fellow. I'm sort of up to date on all the politics, so I thought it would be an interesting video for me to make. If you like this video, please leave a like and maybe subscribe if you want to see more. Please check out everything I'm doing on all these different social media platforms if you so wish. Thanks for tuning in today. I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.